Welcome back to 60 Minutes. Gavrilo Princip fired the deadliest shot in history. One bullet that ricocheted around the world and defined the course of the 20th century. Princip assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo in 1914, triggering the beginning of World War I and the unprecedented carnage that would follow. This week marks the 100th anniversary of the Archduke's assassination. Of course, when war was declared, Australians would clamber to take part, a young nation desperate to prove itself and to do its bit for Mother England. No one could have had any idea of the terrible cost that lay ahead. The Latin Bridge in Sarajevo spans the Miljacka River. It's an elegant little bridge with a romantic name, yet what happened here a century ago would trigger the annihilation of millions. So 100 years ago, it all happened about this time of day.
A festival, St Vitus Day, crowds waiting for the arrival of the heir apparent to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It must have been packed.
So the mob were pretty happy to see him.
Seem to have been flags all over the place.
I'm walking back in time with Australian military historian Brad Monera, retracing the final journey of Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie on the 28th of June 1914. But there were some people in town who didn't like him and wanted to get rid of him.
Very much so. A group of very young terrorists.
Gavrilo Princip was one of 7 assassins lining the Archduke's route. Their mission was to kill him and free the Balkans from the shackles of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The first assassination attempt with a homemade bomb fails. Despite that, the royal procession races on regardless to the town hall for a civic function.
Gavrilo Princip, 19-year-old assassin, leaves his position here because he sees the first attempt has failed. He crosses the road in the crowd, wondering what to do, milling around, and suddenly the royal entourage returns.
They come back.
They come back.
Back down the street.
Down the route that they had chosen initially.
At the Latin Bridge, the Archduke's driver stops, apparently confused as to which way he is supposed to go.
So he stops here, confused, and Princip is standing on this corner, and the Archduke stops right in front of him.
He can't believe his luck.
He can't believe his luck. They're only a metre away. He gets 2 shots before somebody leaps on him.
The first shot mortally wounds Duchess Sophie. The second hits the Archduke in the jugular vein. He too will die within the hour. And it's fair to say that that bullet, that second bullet, has enormous consequences in history.
That bullet kills 20 million people. It's got to be the most important murder in history because it initiates the First World War.
With the Austro-Hungarian Empire blaming Serbia for the murder of the heir apparent, they declare war on the Balkan state. This tears the old imperial order apart. Britain, France and Russia line up against Austria, Turkey and Germany.
Historians have referred to it as war by timetable, that, once the dominoes began to fall, nothing was going to stop them.
And the enthusiasm on the first day in Australia was incredible, wasn't it?
It just exploded. Our Prime Minister promised Britain that we would support them to the last man and the last shilling, and he offered an expeditionary force of 20,000 men. Well, on the first day in Sydney, in front of Victoria Barracks in Paddington, over 3,500 men queue to enlist. But I don't think they imagined just how great the price they were going to have to pay for being part of the Empire Club.
The first down payment on this massive toll was made here on the shores of Gallipoli, all part of Winston Churchill's deluded grand scheme to take Turkey and knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war. In the crisp pre-dawn of Sunday, the 25th of April, 1915, the diggers hit the shore.
We're at Ari Burnu. the northern tip of Anzac Cove, and it was right here that a 26-year-old accountant from Brisbane named Duncan Chapman, a platoon commander with the 9th Battalion, was the first Australian ashore, according to Charles Bean, our great military historian.
An accountant? Who says accountants are boring?
Well, indeed, you know, just indicative of the nature of the Australian Imperial Force. Everybody wanted to be in it.
My family connection with this place is a grandfather who was here on the day. Not literally here at Anzac Cove, but just out there with the New Zealand Navy, putting men ashore in small boats. I'll never forget what he told me about that day. He said, "Son, I considered myself to be a very fortunate man that I was a sailor and not a soldier." It's a hell of a climb. I can only imagine what it would be like if people were shooting at you.
And every bush has got prickles on it.
Yeah, you can't grab hold of anything.
The Anzac objective was to take the high ground and then help secure the whole peninsula.
We're on the ridge first rushed by the Australians. There's Anzac Cove,
Yeah.
McLagan's Ridge, Pluggy's Plateau, and the Sphinx.
These landmarks became part of Australian folklore, and so did the Turkish commander Mustafa Kemal, the famous Ataturk, who told his men, "I don't order you to fight, I order you to die." Any thoughts of an easy Anzac conquest were quickly dashed as men dug in to survive.
And the Turkish resistance is getting stronger by the hour, and so there's desperation is starting to creep in, and certainly the confusion is becoming more and more evident. No unit is able to take a decent roll call for the first week. It's not until the 1st and 2nd of May that soldiers have got any idea whether their mates are living or dead.
For 8 deadly months, fighting waged across the peninsula. Australian legends of endurance and mateship were forged here in the heat of what was clearly a futile and doomed campaign. And if there was one battle that summed up the whole disaster, it was the Battle of the Neck on August 7.
There is something tragic about the massacre that occurred here at the Neck.
The trench line the Australians launched from is still here.
What happens?
They get out on the call of a whistle. 4 waves of them.
Over the top.
Over the top. Straight over the top with fixed bayonets, straight at an entrenched Turkish enemy that's now on the other side.
You have such a whistle, don't you?
I do indeed. All along the line, men rise up out of this trench, upscaling ladders and straight into withering fire. Some of them are shot straight back into the trench, and the second wave is already packing itself in.
Another whistle. What is in that sound that makes men go to their death?
Training and discipline and love of their mates. We know that 8 sets of brothers and cousins died in that charge that morning.
Your legs. Springs. Steel springs. Get away!
The slaughter of men from the 8th and 10th Light Horse Regiments was the shattering conclusion to the classic Peter Weir, essentially anti-war film, Gallipoli.
There's no doubt that they got out of this trench because they believed in each other.
Because even as a historian now, you'd agree that the whole thing makes no other greater sense, does it?
But these men didn't have that advantage of hindsight. This was, for many of them, their first battle. And so they needed to prove to their mates, they needed to prove to Australia, they needed to prove to the Empire that they could do it here as well as anybody, anywhere could.
And did they prove that?
I think all they proved was that they could die gallantly.